Trina, welcome back to Revitalized Womanhood. I am so excited that you're going to record with me. Poor Trina, I was like, I need you to record with me right now, as soon as possible. I forgot. Thanksgiving is around the corner. It's really true because I actually did record another episode for my Friday episode that came out yesterday. And then I got done. I was so proud of myself for getting it all recorded and la, 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 la. And then I was like, wait a minute. When's Thanksgiving? And I was thinking 2 weeks from now. And I'm like, oh, that's not good. It's next week. So I legitimately had to record my Thanksgiving Friday episode like the day before. So my assistant hates my guts right now. And then I was like, oh, by the way, I'd really like to do an episode for Thanksgiving. So ladies, Trina is back with us. We love her. And I certainly appreciate you because this is actually even ironic for the topic at hand here today that we're having.
Yes. Yes.
That I reached out to you in a time of need and you were so sweet to do it for me. So why don't you reintroduce yourself to my listeners? Hopefully we've got some new ones along and maybe they've missed your episode and this is definitely going to make them want to go back to your episode.
Awesome. Yes. So I am Trina Glines and I am a life coach that I focus mainly on marriage, helping women to be able to strengthen their marriages. I have an online course, a 10-week online course for women. I actually have started coaching men a little bit. And so I have some men clients as well that want to figure out their wives. And so that's been really fun and a new challenge. But my main thing is just trying to help women live their best life and to be able to change their perceptions because we're all stuck with those same perception lenses that have been influenced from our background, from our experiences. And sometimes it's good to take those off and to see some different perspectives. And it helps ladies be able to just like have these big, huge aha moments that have just been, it's just the best to watch that happen. But one of my main things I teach women is the language of men. I teach women literally the language of their husbands, how they think, how they work, so that we can get rid of those resentments and assumptions they should be doing things the way we do them. We're so opposite. We're so different, but together we are very complementary to each other. So it's very empowering when you learn that.
And it's beautiful work. I absolutely love your work. And I have taken a couple of Trina's courses and they are wonderful. And because of that, so just like you're saying, I am able to see things in a different perspective. And one of my favorite things now that actually, because of directly related, because of your courses, is all of the Instagram reels that are satirical comedy, right? It almost offends me to the point that I unfollow these accounts. And even if it's people that I know that they are not trying to be disrespectful to their husbands, they think it's funny. But in that joking, I think what's the truth under that joke, right? Behind every joke is a truth. Isn't that what we're all taught? Like there's some honesty underneath there and you're masking it with this comedy. And so often that's what we see. And for me and my women's community, it's women who are making fun of the fact that having children is so hard and having a house to take care of is so hard. And they're so put upon for all of this laundry and I think you are so blessed. You are so blessed. And you don't want to shame anybody, but a little bit of, can we please flip the narrative? Can we please, let's look at everything instead of through the eyes of a low, that this laundry is hard and it's never going to end. And maybe look at it as, guess what? It's going to end. And then it's going to be sad because you're going to miss it. Same with our husbands. It's like they do so much for us. Why don't you be celebrating the wins? He's human, right? Just like me. I don't want him going around making fun of me to his buddies.
Right. Yeah.
And it's like, let's celebrate this. And I probably sound like a big nerd because I'm not cool and trendy and right. And that goes right into, honestly, what we wanted to talk about today, and that is these buzzwords. So these
Mhm.
are kind of a buzz concept, right? The making fun of your spouse, making fun of motherhood, making fun of, these are kind of buzz concepts. But what is it that you are feeling like you're seeing too many of in social media? Your buzzwords, you kind of let
Mhm.
me in on this, and I loved it. And this is another reason why I pounced on Trina. I'm like, we have got to record before Thanksgiving.
Yes, yes. So you had reached out to me and said, "Hey, let's talk about boundaries." And I'm like, "Okay, great. I would love to talk about boundaries." But I then said, "Have you kind of seen the research on how boundaries is being misused, overused? It's becoming." Um, I watched another pod or listened to another podcast that talked about how we're doing the same thing with gaslighting. We're doing the same thing with narcissism. We're doing the same thing with self care. Um, there, once again, it's getting out of balance with those things that we're trying to create more balance, right?
Mm,
It's like there's for women, our natural DNA is to be givers and adapters. And with that giving and adapting, we are typically not really good at self care because we will give and adapt that self care away, right? Um, and what happens is now been this huge movement on this self care, which is wonderful. It is great, and but take it out of balance. I've seen moms and work with moms that have basically wrote off their families because self-care has become more important than the family. And that is actually going against a woman's DNA, her natural DNA. She is not going to find happiness whatsoever in that because we are our DNA is givers and adapters, and that's where we kind of find a lot of our joy, but it's finding balance in that too. So I always tell ladies, I'm like, it's not going to be a 50-50. You're not going to do 50 of taking care of everybody else and 50 taking care of you. That's actually out of balance for us. You might be around 75, 80, maybe. I don't think I ever was. I was probably more like maybe 90 of, you know, giving and adapting 10% self care. Um, do I wish I would have done that maybe a little bit different as I was raising my kids? Yes, but I didn't know what I know now. Um, anyway, and so w- once again, it just comes back to finding that correct balance and things. And this you could say it's a trigger word, I don't know, of boundaries has been taken way out of way out of control, way out of people don't even know what boundaries mean anymore. They're so confused by even well, how do I set the boundaries? What do I even do? Because everybody has all these boundaries that I'm like, what? Well, I don't have a boundary for that. So you fire away some questions and we'll
that
get
was
into that.
perfect. That was actually my first question. That was actually my first question. And I actually want you ladies listening, I want you to think about what is your percentage? Like Trina said here, what is your percentage? This is not a 50-50. Oh my gosh, if I did 50-50, I would feel the mom guilt. Talk about the mom guilt because I always talk about there's no mom guilt if you're aligned, if your values are set correctly, right? There won't be mom guilt because you'll be balanced. But I think if I was 50-50, you're absolutely right. I would feel so much shame. I would. And that's me. That's me. However, I do think that I am 80-20. I do think that I am a solid 80-20. And that is where I find my happiness. I'm going to have to look into it. Next year is going to be a lot of give and take, but yeah, that's going to be interesting. I'm going to keep that in the forefront of my mind and keep that present. But ladies, I want you to think about that while we're talking about this. So the first question I actually did have with you, and I just got off a conversation with a friend on Marco, and she asked the same question, was how do you determine whether or not it is a situation where you're setting a boundary in a healthy way or you are just taking the easy way out and not wanting to have a difficult conversation, not wanting to have conflict, not wanting to, right, push that
Mhm.
relationship any further.
Mhm. That is a really good question. Obviously, each situation is going to be so individual, which can make that answer to that question so difficult. But I think something we can ask ourselves is this a relationship worth nurturing? Or has this person become a toxic person in your life that you need to set more strict boundaries with? Um, what we have to be so careful with that I'm noticing is if somebody doesn't think like me, then I must need to set a boundary because I don't want to hear what they think.
That is
That's
definitely happening a lot right now.
yeah, and that's not right. I mean, if you're setting boundaries for that kind of stuff, if there's not a toxicity involved in it, okay, so there's a
Right.
difference. If there's not a toxicity type thing involved in it, if it's just somebody wanting to share different opinions and they have different thoughts, it's all in the way we choose to think ourselves about that. We can be the greatest tool that any human can learn is how to be a good listener. And being a good listener is to hear somebody, to seek to understand somebody, and to validate. So, heard, understood, and validate. Those three things, none of those three things say you have to agree, right?
Yeah.
So, if somebody else has a different opinion, you can be like, oh, I have never thought of that before. That's really interesting. Thanks for sharing that with me. Done. Nowhere in that did you say, oh, I have to agree with them. So if the boundary comes in saying, I can't have this person be involved in this part of my life at all because of what they believe or what they think, then it's like, well, is that a boundary that's really needed? Or are you able to just be like, she thinks differently than I do? And that's okay. That's
Right.
okay. I actually, I have family members that think a lot differently than I do. And I don't want to write them off, right? Their relationships are important enough to me that I'm not going to write them off, but I have set some different boundaries with that. Um, there are things that I've chosen, like, okay, I'm going to guide the conversation away from certain subjects, right? So it's not that I'm going to just write them off and be like, I'm not going to ever talk to them. I can't get into that. I just guide it away. And it's interesting because there'll be things they'll bring up and I'll just kind of like, either not comment too much or whatever, and then kind of move on to the next thing just because I know where their thinking is. I know where my thinking is. And it's just like, it's not worth it. So let's just discuss things that I know I'm not going to have to worry about. So that's almost like one of those boundaries that I just kind of maneuver in and out of where I want to be, but I'm not going to set this hard boundary of I can't even have discussions with them. I'm not even going to talk to them because I don't agree with the things they say.
And
I don't
that's
know
what
if
I
that
think
answered
is
that.
it totally does. Yes, obviously it's got to be something that's not going to add toxic behavior in your life, right? Or create something that's really physically going to harm you or emotionally even, you know. But we have friends. I think who doesn't have friends anymore that came when was it the great split that finally happened? It must have been the Trump election. That was like the
Yes.
great split. I think that was
Yes.
the end all of everything. All of a sudden
Yeah.
this line just got drawn across the entire country and that was the great divide. But we all had friends on either side of that line, and I'm not talking just politically, but that's just a very easy example. And I still have those friends and I love them dearly. And some of the things that they say, I'm just like, wow, that is a way of thinking about something, right? I'm not disagreeing, I'm not agreeing, but just like you're saying, well, that's interesting, right? I don't need to press it any further. Same with religion, same with things like that.
Mhm.
And with Thanksgiving coming up, ladies, I hope you're listening to this because you will have the family members that bring up, these people that bring up conversations because I don't know why they bring up these conversations,
I
whether it's
know.
because it just happens to come up or because they just like to get a rise out of people. I don't know why. I don't know why certain things just always seem to come up. But absolutely, like you said, figure out a way to deflect. It's like when your 2-year-old's throwing a tantrum. What do? We distract. Let's
Yes.
focus on something else and guide this away, because otherwise you're going to have a soapbox happening in the middle of Thanksgiving dinner. And in the climate right now we're at, that could go any which way. That could go religion, sexuality, that could go political. Oh my gosh, there are so
Yeah.
many things where this could go wrong. And then the boundary goes from being one that could have just been a conflict resolution to actual toxic relationship. This needs to have a serious boundary involved, when really it could have been diffused, right?
Yeah, for sure. And there is nothing wrong with saying, like, if somebody brings something up and they're trying, because there are those individuals that are going to try really hard to get you to see
To
their
agree.
side and to agree,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
And there is nothing wrong with saying, I really appreciate you sharing your point of view, and all, it's given me some things to think about, but I also think it's okay if we both see things differently. It's
Right.
okay, right? And
Right.
to just keep it light like that instead of having to bark back, having to, argue back, and feel like you have to stand your ground. Stand your ground with, it's okay to have some neutrality and to also know that every one of us thinks differently.
Right.
That is something really, really important to understand, and especially for women, because, well, number one, let's throw men and women in here a little bit. Men have a very strong connection to their opinions. Very strong connection to their opinions. Men take time to form their opinions. They won't form an opinion off of one person's advice, or thoughts. So, women, think about this. Have you had a time where you've shared some information you learned with your husband, and he's like, I don't know about that? And you're like,
Mm-hmm.
seriously? Just, this is true, right? And then, like, weeks later, he comes to you and goes, yeah, I heard this. And you're like, are you freaking kidding me? I just told you that 2 weeks ago and you wouldn't believe me. And it wasn't because he didn't believe you, it was because he needed to hear that from multiple sources before he's going to allow it to affect his opinion, which is actually really quite amazing about men, that they're not going to be swayed very easily. We're ladies, this isn't to say that we are less than in any way, but we as women, we're swayed quite easily. We have the ability to change our opinion quite quickly. And once again, it comes in with that giving and adapting. We will give and adapt, right? We will give and adapt, even with our opinions. And so, because of that, we think men and others should give and adapt the way we do. We think as women, we should be able to have influence over their opinions quite readily, because I could influence your opinion probably quite readily, Gina, on some certain things, just because that's how women work. But you're not going to do that with men. And so if women can understand that and just look at that like, oh, okay, that's fine. Now I just look at it with my husband. If I say something and he's like, yeah, whatever, or it's like, oh, I don't know about that. I'm like, that's okay. I know in a while he's going to be like, oh.
He's going to do his fact checks. He's going to do his fact
Yes.
checking. I call that the wedge salad theory. It was on Everybody Loves Raymond, and I don't know, whatever. The point of it was Deborah. He came home from being out with his buddies, and he's like, "Oh, I got this really great salad. I think it was called a wedge salad." And she had been talking about it previously, and she's like, "Are you kidding me?" Anyway, it's such a dumb thing, to a perfect example of that. And honestly, that probably goes back to their instincts as natural um, providers, right? Protectors and providers, for them to make sure they don't just wish and wash. And that's what you want.
Yes,
You really want that, ladies. You want that to be something that you encourage, because you don't want a husband who would just sway in the breeze, right? You want
exactly.
one that's figured out, This is why I figured this out. This is how far I took it, how long it took me to come to this conclusion. And this is what it is now. So when Rick comes to a conclusion like that for us and our family, I know he's done the legwork. I trust it, right? But there are
Yes.
times when I definitely come to him with things and he's like, that's not true. I'm like, nah. It may or may not be. He may or may not be right, though.
Yes, yes.
So I just pulled up this definition actually while we were talking about it because I wanted to see. It didn't give me like a Webster's dictionary, but this one's good in terms of boundaries with relationships. Hey, will you shut this, please? It says boundaries show where one thing ends and another begins. That was the actual definition, but boundaries in relationships are kind of like this. They help each person figure out where one person ends and the other begins. And I really like that because that starts to kind of guide us into noticing if things are codependent in relationships, you
Yes.
know? And
Yes.
actually, I had one of the ladies in my community who is a recovering codependent. She is so great. And she talks about this a lot. And she actually taught us a lesson on it, on some of the things that she's learned. And I have never in a million years, I would have never, I am a very independent person. You know, I am very strong in what I think, what I say, whatever. I thought until she started bringing up some examples of these things. And I was like, wow, I had no idea. And some of the things, it's happening without you knowing it because it's not hurting you, right? It's not something that's toxic. It's not something that's, but it's there. So what would happen once you notice it, when you start to separate it, how much easier you're going to be able to find your own footing and find your own balance and be able to complement each other rather than not be able to live without the other.
Yes. That is so good. That is so good. And I think I've seen that own transition in my life and my marriage. I think I had a lot more codependency through the beginning of our marriage, and it has now switched to where it's that I hope I can articulate this correctly, that I am just in such a healthier place, and yet, well, I shouldn't say and yet, and our relationship is even better not
Right.
having that um, desperate need of different things from him, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, and I think obviously that goes along in all relationships. Um, we really should pick apart like some examples of how to bring those boundaries in, especially over the next 2 months or month and a half that is just crazy with the holidays and everything and what that looks like, um, to be able to stay your healthiest self. Um, so yes, I agree with the figuring out if it's a codependent type of relationship that you're having. And can you give some examples from
Uh,
things that she shared? That
what was it that she shared that I was actually shocked that that was a codependent thing. Mm, oh no, I'm going to be able to think of this as soon as we get off this
Of
call.
course. Of
But I
course.
do have some examples in my mind of some things I'd like to break down. And that is,
Okay.
I think, for women, and what I've found in my community and what I've talked to other women about is situations where you've gotten this friend and all of a sudden you just want to jump in. You want to dive in, right? Because you're so excited to have this friend. You're so excited to have somebody that understands you and relates to you, and which goes further and deeper. The thing under the thing is you're not getting that in other relationships, so you've now clinged to this woman, right? And she's clinging to you, same thing. You're both missing these things, so you've clinged together. And then your world starts to, instead of just kind of going like this and being like somewhat on the same page, you're now going like this together and weaving, and you can't do one thing without the other, and that kind of thing. And it starts to disrupt other parts of your lives. right? So think about it in those terms, ladies. Think about if maybe you go 2 days without talking to this person on Marco and you feel like you've been shunned, or kind of even the fact that it comes into your mind that is something wrong, and then you kind of check yourself even, and you're like, wait a minute, whoa, nothing's wrong. She's a busy mom too, just like I'm a busy mom. I don't want her to think that something's wrong if that's happening, so I shouldn't think that something's wrong. But and then here's the point too, when it's a good relationship still and you're noticing that it's becoming very codependent, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you have that conversation in saying, hey, and because you're going to be worried that they are going to be like shunned, right? They're going to feel like you just totally, if they're the kind of person that gets defensive. The point of this is you both have to be adults for this to work, right? Having these
Yes, yes.
conversations means both parties have to be adults. But so I'm going to have a part 2 to this one. So you're in a good place. You're best friends. You get along so well. You talk, everything's perfectly fine, but you're starting to notice things that maybe you're like, this is going to be a uncomfortable thing if this goes any further, and then I have to deal with it. So how can I deal with it now?
Mm-hmm. So good. Well, first of all, you have to recognize it.
Yeah. There you
You
go.
can't, it's like anything in life, we can't change something we don't recognize. So that could be your first thing on your list, ladies. If you are listening to this, do I have somebody in my life right now that I'm doing this more with? And if I don't hear from her, I'm like, what's wrong? And I get that anxiety or whatever. Ask yourself that question. Is there somebody, and is it my spouse? Right?
Right.
Is it even
Anybody.
my spouse?
Anybody.
Anybody? And then be like, wow, maybe it is. Maybe, yeah, so and so, I do feel that. And if I don't hear from her, I do feel that. And and before I kind of take through that process, I just want to say the other end of where you're going to get to going through this process is going to be so freeing.
Right.
So it's going to feel so much better that it's so worth going through the uncomfortableness to get there, because there's
Right.
going to be a little bit of uncomfortableness, right? And so say we'll use, it's a girlfriend for an example. um, that's when you say, hey, do you want to go to lunch or something? Let's go to lunch. And you go to lunch, and then you're just truthful, you're just honest. And I don't even care if you use this podcast as
Yeah.
your opener for it, and just say, I just realized that my relationship with you has gotten to an unhealthy level in the fact of my expectations for you and myself. And it's not fair. It's not fair what I expect from you. And so I just want to let you know, I'm sorry, number one, if I have ever come across clingy to you, or felt like I, you know, made you feel like you are my sole person that I have to go to, and you have to be there for me for every moment that I need. And starting it that way, especially if the person might have a codependency on you, is going to kind of be a softer a softer approach, because you're apologizing for how you have come forward in this relationship,
It's
right?
me,
So
not you.
yes, you're putting you're taking all the responsibility, going, I didn't realize I was being like this. And I listened to this podcast, and I didn't even think about it. And I've probably made you uncomfortable at sometimes, because I've probably pried in your life when you didn't have time for me. Your family needed you or whatever. And so go and so then you're like, so I really want us to have the best of the best of the healthiest relationship. And if there's time in when I reach out to you on Marco, and you can't get back with me right away, it's okay. I'm going to
And
be
I
okay.
understand. Yeah.
Yes, you have a life besides me. And I need to recognize this, and I need to be okay with this. And so I'm letting you know that it's okay if you have other things to do. I know you're going to get back with me because I know you're a true friend. And it's okay if there's space between us at times. And not only are you having this conversation to let her know that, but you're having this conversation to tell yourself this is okay,
Right.
right? That this is okay, because what I love more than anything is when I have friendships that we haven't talked in months
Yes.
and we pick up right where we left off. Isn't that like the coolest thing?
It is. It is. I know exactly what you're talking about. I hope we all know exactly what you're talking about, because you haven't had these expectations with this person. You appreciate that they have their own life and they have their own things going on, just like you do. And you want them to be successful and happy, and nothing better than when you get together again and everybody is successful and happy. That is the best feeling in the world. Yes, absolutely. I will give you an example of where I did this, ladies, because I probably err on the side of cutting people out of my life. Do you know what I mean? Like, I do have a lot of friendships where I could just pick them up and we don't talk for years and years, and then we could go to lunch and just, I love them dearly. But I'm more of a, I don't know if it's from childhood. It is from a very young age. I'm more easily to say, I don't need that in my life. I've never had a problem with that. I'm not a two, right? Twos have a lot harder time doing that. They feel obligated. They feel like they need to make everyone happy. Right. Um, so I did have a situation where it was at my last retreat, actually. And I had to say something to one of my very good friends about, hey, what you just did hurt my feelings. And it was uncomfortable. It was not fun to do because I didn't know where she was going to go with it. I knew where I could go with it, but I didn't know where she was going to go with it, right? And I didn't want to hurt her. But I did. I said, listen, this is really weird. And I have no right to have had that hurt my feelings. I recognized that. I recognized that there was no reason for me to feel upset about something. And I said, but it did. It hurt my feelings. And I just want to let you know so that there's not any kind of this goes on and more resentments build up. And she said, same, she was so good about it. And she said, oh my gosh, I can see where you would feel bad about that. And I'm sorry, because of course she didn't do it on purpose, right? And we had this very awkward, uncomfortable moment. It was the first awkward and uncomfortable moment we've ever had to have. And I guarantee you that our relationship is 10 times stronger because of that moment. It went the best way it could, right? And also, ladies, I love to say this to my community is, now who does she know that I am? I am the kind of person that will let her know. I am the kind of person that she doesn't have to worry that I'm over here playing games or I'm over here like, ugh, she did this to me and I am not going to talk to her for 3 days,
Yeah.
3.5 days.
Yeah.
Or, you know what I mean? Like this whole concept of what women think a women's community would be. They think it's going to be the backbiting. They think it's going to be the gossiping. They think it's going to be the things. And it's like, no, you know what you're going to get with me. And so now going forward, I hope that she feels like she has a safe place to land on me if she ever has to do that. Or she also knows that I'm going to tell her how it is, because that's just who I am. I'm not doing it to hurt her. So the other one that was bad, though, I have the opposite of this, ladies. And this was well before I started this community. I had not had these kinds of things in mind and these tools to go back to, and people like Trina to help me through things like this and see things in better perspective. I had a very close friend that it was like an instant friendship because we had the same schedule. So we both would go to the gym. We both had kids the same age. So we'd hit the gym the same time. We'd go to the same classes, and it became very, very codependent, very codependent. And then a situation happened and she blew up. I mean, she did not handle this situation well at all. And I was like, oh, you are now out of my life forever. That was it. That was it. It got to the point of such an unhealthy buildup of expectations, resentment on her part that she was feeling, that instead of just letting me know, built up to a point that it was an explosion, right? There was no pressure coming out of this kettle. The lid just blew. And so I immediately wrote her off, and have since I was pregnant with Locke and he's 3. Have not had any one with or the other with this person.
Wow.
So that is 2 completely different ways that this could go.
Yeah, it's so true. And it's interesting because even though I have researched and been learning all of these different skills and, just how to manage life, I still don't do the things perfectly either. And it's interesting because I was going to say a minute ago when we were talking about, if you have to have that conversation with a friend, if you become codependent, to make sure you're asking yourself, what causes me to do that? Where am I lacking in my life
Good one.
that would cause me to need that, so you can try and figure out um, what the base is, so you can work on that change. Because even like in your scenario that was so extreme with the friend, saying I'm done, we're over, you look at that in comparison to the first one where it was like, wow, I just created a healthy space for us both, right? But this one I had to do the cutout. Well, I did a semi cutout like you with a friend because of, I call it blueprints, stuff that has taken place in our life that creates our blueprints, right? And I had a blueprint from growing up of not being heard. I wasn't heard. And if I share something very specific with someone and they don't remember that, and later down the road make me feel completely unheard, I'm like, I'm done. I'm done. And that happened with this friend who, I mean, we would text all the time. We were kind of texting buds. We didn't really do a lot together, but she was our we were soundboards with each other. And I was going through kind of a hard time with my health, and I had asked for something specific from her, just from support side. And a couple months down the road, I was complaining about some of the stuff with my health, and she didn't do what I had kind of asked her to do when I had those hard moments. And man, it threw me backwards. And I just went, I can't trust anybody. I've asked for something and I can't trust anybody. That was kind of where I went to from that past, from that growing up, not even recognizing in the moment. I just shut down. I just shut down. And it wasn't until probably, and we still would text very rarely. She knew something was wrong because I just kind of fell off the face of the earth. And, but we would text and I pretended everything was fine, right? But I just quit sharing with her. And it was probably, I don't know, 4 or 5, 6 months ago that she texted and just said, I'm really sorry if I ever did anything. And I'm like, you didn't do a thing. It was 100% me, 100% me. And I was able to share with her what took place, and she apologized for making me feel like I hadn't heard her, but time is too short. Here I am. I have the tools, right? And I still won't get it perfect because those blueprints can be kind of big. Those blueprints can really affect your life even when you think you have them under control. And so
Yeah.
that's why I say it's very important that we ask that question, whether it's setting boundaries, whether it's feeling codependence with somebody. What is my reason for this? Why did I, if I would have sat back and went, why did I fall back to that blueprint again? because I've done this several times in different relationships because of that. Not feeling heard is such a big piece from my upbringing, I guess. But if we would just stop and ask ourselves, why? Because time is too short. It's too short to
Yeah.
be upset with people or to pull away from people that really are good people you could have in your life, right? And so it's that inner reflection. It's that looking in, and it wasn't hard for me to tell her it wasn't you. It was 100% me. Why I didn't do that a year ago instead, you know. But life gets busy, and you just kind of get going. But that's kind of where that boundary thing comes in. Taking it back to creating boundaries to keep others from being able to share their thoughts and opinions. Like, I don't want to hear that, so I'm just going to set a boundary and be done with it. Um, we have to be careful with that because you're going to boundary yourself away from everyone.
Yep. Yes. You just brought this right back around to where I was actually thinking I wanted to bring this right back around.
Sweet.
Thank you. Thank you for knowing
Yes.
my mind, Trina. Okay. What I wanted to say was what you just said got me thinking about was yes, you're going to end up with no one else around you because you're not going to like everything. It's what do we learn? And that's why I really don't think that this overusing boundaries is because I know we like to blame the next generation, like these kids and the millennials and blah 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 whatever you call them, I don't know. My niece does reels and makes fun of all of it, but I don't even know because I don't even care. But we like to blame them and say that they're not going to have these good values. They're not going to have good, right? With us and our boys, we're scared to death that they won't. Look at all these men that went to these wars, that fought these wars, and like Normandy and Bellwood, and of course, obviously, we live our lives in a way to try to shield them. We don't want them to have to live that way. We don't want that. But then in return, we're creating people who would never be able to do
Yeah.
that, right?
Yeah.
And that's a huge fear for Rick and myself. That's a huge fear for us, for our boys. But anyway, so I'm not even blaming this on the next generation. I think it's my generation that is now using these buzzwords: toxic masculinity, boundaries, self-care, like you say, narcissism, gaslight. I feel like we are now getting them from maybe my parents' generation, where they didn't have anything like this. You just did what you did, and if you talked
Yeah.
about it, forget it. And
Yeah.
so now the product of that is us being like, we're seeing, wait, why am I upset because of these things? What are my blueprints, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so now we're finding it out, and we're creating these concepts of why something is, because we're logical and we have to have reasons why. But because of that, with the boundaries, I think we are eliminating the best kind of growth we can possibly have. And that's because you have conflict over here, right? You have struggle, and you have your conflict resolution. And like I said with that first friend, we are now stronger and better because of it. But we never would have been if I just cut her off. I would have just cut her off and moved on to the next one. It's like these dating apps. Holy cow. Hang on. This is
Oh,
a
yeah.
way right turn. But it's like you always think that something better is going to come along. And so you're
Yeah.
just like swipe, 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 swipe.
Yeah.
And that's terrifying. There's a concept of that the grass is always greener and it never ends. That's
Yeah.
terrifying. So that's exactly what we're saying here with the boundaries is if you are just doing this. But what I wanted to come back to also was when you're doing that and eliminating these relationships, just and there may have been even a good reason. I'm not exactly always saying that there wasn't a good reason. There may have been. I've got one in my mind that I know exactly there was a very good reason for it. But it's hurting everybody else in the family. Everybody is suffering because of this. And it's not a toxic thing. It's nothing that can't be healed. It's nothing other than pride, right? It's
Yeah.
nothing other than that.
Yes.
So now think to yourself, who am I damaging because I will not let this go, because I am not willing to step up and fix this, be the bigger person. It's now becoming resentment from other people with me. They're starting to have resentment from me for holding on to this grudge or this boundary.
Yes. Yes, exactly. And a therapist that I really respect and do a lot of work with, he said it's really important in order to have healthy relationships, you have to be allowed to share how you feel, right? And so if we're annoyed by somebody sharing something and we're just like, okay, we're done, then how is that a health? How are you ever going to have a healthy relationship? If you've accidentally hurt somebody's feelings in your family, like your first situation,
Mm-hmm.
okay, but let's pretend it's a family member. Let's pretend it's a sister. She's coming to
Yeah.
Thanksgiving, okay? Your sister's coming to Thanksgiving, but she hurt your feelings because of something she said. And so you're just going to put on this face of, I just have a boundary. I cannot deal with her. I'm not going to deal with her. I'm just going to be, she's going to come and I'm just going to pretend everything's okay. And so she comes. Number one, that's a bunch of crock. You could cut the tension with a knife. That's just
Right.
lame.
And
That's just
everyone
stupid.
feels
And
it.
everybody feels it. Everybody feels it. So that's just stupid. Number one. So number two, how much better it would be for you to have had a conversation before they even come to Thanksgiving and say, listen, I love you. You're my sister. I know the situation happened. I trust that your intention was not to hurt me. And I'm sorry I took it as that you did try to hurt me. I don't want us to have ill feelings. It's just not worth it. It's okay that we both think differently. I'm just throwing out different things that can be said,
Right.
right? Just how much better that would be. So when she walks in your door to your house, you're not having to put up this boundary that I'm not going to have any discussion with her. I'm not going to, you know what I mean? Like, where is that healthy? That's not a healthy relationship in any ways, and I get it. We have to, and that's what makes boundaries so challenging because there's a difference. There's a toxic person that, yeah, you may have to have done that with, right? But I want to say those toxic people are very far and few between.
Mm-hmm. And
But
hopefully they're not showing up for Thanksgiving dinner.
exactly. And unfortunately, I feel like social media makes us feel like everybody can be toxic.
Right.
And
Yes.
so it it is okay for people to think differently than me. It is okay. It is okay for us to disagree. It's okay. I think we have to be okay with that. Um, and be okay with people coming into, this sister that's going to come and she has a totally different view, or does her family totally different than you, and that is okay. We need to be okay with that, and that does not have to be a boundary. A boundary is only going to be needed if if something somebody else is doing is really personally injuring you, right? Then, like a real serious personal injury. What that might look like, obviously emotional, physical abuse, um, any any abuse for your children, right? Those are going to be boundaries. Um, Throw some others out there. I mean, yeah, you could have a family member that maybe just brings complete toxicity every time they walk in the door. Well, I hope you're going to get to the point where you're like, I'm sorry, you can't come,
Yeah.
right? You can't come. Do you have an example of that one?
Oh my gosh. Yes. Wow. Every family has one of those, I think. But what you just made me think of is it takes me right back to personal accountability. At what point are you putting your emotional baggage on this other person? Now, I'm not saying they don't deserve something. I'm not saying they're just a victim. They're not.
Mhm.
They're doing
Mhm.
their actions, whatever. But I don't have to take that onto me. I
Yes.
don't have to
Yes.
carry that on me. I don't have to become this person. It's like I say in all my Thanksgiving episodes, it's not my job to make sure you have a good time. It's not
Yes.
my job to make sure everybody gets along. It's not my job to make sure everybody's happy. It's not my job. It is my job to be me
Mhm.
and to be the healthiest, happiest version of me. And when I am that, it's going to overflow and set the tone for everybody else, right? So
Yes.
when that happens, you don't get to be the victim and like, oh, you hurt me, or oh,
Yeah.
you're always negative, right? It's
Yeah.
you have responsibility here as well.
Mhm. Let others own their own emotions, their own thinking, their own actions. They aren't, we have to stop owning. Like if somebody says something that was rude at the dinner table, or sounded like a cutting remark, you have two options. You have two options. Oh my gosh, I can't believe she would say that about that way and make me feel this way. I can't believe she would say something like that to me. Or, wow, that was a really odd comment. That's funny that she thinks like
That's
that,
odd.
right? That's funny she thinks like that. Let her own it. You don't have to own what other people think, feel, and say.
Yeah.
It's actually very, very healthy. I don't know if, I mean, so there was, in psychology they teach, um, oh, now the word just went, hold on, cognitive cycles, cognitive thinking,
Ah, we call
right?
them
They
a revitalized loop in the Revitalized
Okay,
Sisterhood. We
all
call it a
right.
revitalized loop.
Revitalized loop. There you go. And so the revitalized loop, will go off that. You ladies know what that is.
Hmm.
And so for me, when I teach it as the model, which is
Hmm.
circumstance, thought, feelings, actions, and results. That is so incredibly powerful because you are going to allow others to own their own, whatever they say, whatever they do, whatever the circumstance is. Your thought needs to be, wow, I can't believe they just acted that way. Instead of, I can't believe they did that to me,
Right.
right? I don't need to own it. Let others own it. It's so empowering when you can work that way and think that way. And, there's something to be said like, unsolicited advice. I think that can rub people wrong
Hmm.
really bad. Very rarely is the person that's giving the unsolicited advice meaning to injure you.
Right. New moms know exactly how this feels.
Yes. They're not. So if you are a new mom and grandma comes, I promise you, grandmas are going to have unsolicited advice. They believe in cutting the ham off on both sides to get it to cook better when really it was just to fit in the pan. Okay. We carry these false traditions. Okay. Grandma is going to have, I can't believe you didn't cut off the sides of your ham so it would fit better, or, that because it makes it taste better. No, it was to fit in the dang pan. Okay. So, anyway, the unsolicited advice is going to happen. We need to stop taking offense to that. We need to stop thinking that I just, they don't mean to make you feel less than, to make you feel incapable. It's just the way, especially older generations and people that have had experience.
Yes.
People that have had experience, they're sharing their experience. Do you have to do it? No.
No.
Do you need a boundary up? I almost swore. No. Thanks, Grandma, for sharing that. And go do whatever you were gonna go do. Right?
Yeah.
There's, yeah, it's not necessary. It's
Yeah,
not necessary to take people out of your life because you are fearful of hearing an opinion.
that's exactly right. You're fearful of, and I want to take that one step even further, is their tone of voice. Is sometimes something comes across as snarky. Sometimes, okay, so this is Rick constantly. And actually I used to hear this from my ex-husband too. So it's a thing. It's a thing with me. It's just Rick thinking this. It's a thing. And I have a tone. I have a tone when I talk. I have a tone. And if resting bitch face was a tone of voice, I would have it. I don't mean to. I don't. It's just like Rick and I will be talking about something and he'll be like, "You don't have to get all this way about it." And I'm like, "That's just my voice. It's just my voice." I'm like, "No, I'm not even mad. I'm not even mad.
Yeah.
It's just my voice." And sometimes I'm sure, like, I don't have all the people listening to this because same thing, they hear it and they're like, ugh, no, thank you. Right? I get
Yeah.
that. I'm okay. I can own that.
Yes.
But at the same time, it is my responsibility to said sisters at the dinner table for Thanksgiving spouting off whatever she's spouting off, and me taking it as, well, that was snarky. Is she really trying to hurt you? Is she really sitting there going, this is going to really light Gina on fire. Watch what I'm going to do. No,
Yes.
she is so I'm not going to say self-centered, but we are all, it's that same concept in high school where it's like, you need to not worry about what other people think because they're not busy worrying about you. They're too busy worrying about themselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everybody is way too self-involved and self-absorbed, right? Moms,
Yes.
we are all just really just focusing on our own kids, making sure no
Mhm.
one gets blown up or falls off the deck or gets their fingers in the pies, right? That's
Right.
all we are concerned about. So if I snap at you because of said I'm doing all this and you happen to just be collateral damage, don't allow that to become a personal attack. And now
Yes.
we've got a wedge between us.
Yes.
Right?
Oh, that is
Especially if I
so
don't
empowering.
notice it, right? If I don't notice that I do it and I can't be like, oh, because sometimes I'll do it to Rick and be like, oh, wow, I'm sorry. That because postpartum anxiety and postpartum depression, like sometimes I am
Yeah.
sometimes I get this like hormonal burst just, and it like comes out like a scream. And he's like, and I'm like, oh, and I will catch it right after. I'll be like,
Yeah. Yeah.
oh, I did not mean for that to be a yell. I'm so sorry. Like it just
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah.
And so if I don't catch it in those moments and you have now taken it on, if you're not going to say something about it for me to apologize and be like, oh, I didn't mean that, now it becomes resentment.
Mhm.
Does
Yes.
everybody see what we're doing here? There is give and take here. This is,
Yes.
you cannot be the victim and you cannot put it all on them.
No. So it's interesting. There's a name for this. Human relationships.
This is really new concept.
Yeah.
It's
We are
brand new.
all human. None of us are going to use all the tools and use all the right etiquette all the time. Not even
Right.
half the time. Like, honestly, right? We're human. We all bring our personalities, our temperaments,
Our blueprints.
our blueprints, our perspectives to the table, and everybody's going to have different ones. And if we can learn, I love this, and this goes perfect with Thanksgiving coming. So, ladies out there, if we can learn to have grace for others as well as grace for ourselves.
Yes, absolutely.
And I really believe we have enough negativity in this world
Oh,
that
yeah.
if we can choose to assume the best, if you're going to assume anything, these people that you're going to be around, they're either your family or your friends. What's going to hurt you to assume the best in them and assume in the best in their intention? How's that going to injure you than assuming the worst?
Right.
Assuming the
It's
best
not.
is always going to be better than assuming the worst. Always, 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 always.
Right.
So I always tell my clients, I'm like, remember, let's assume the best. Assume the best in your husband. And that it saves so much because we shouldn't assume anyway, but we're going to do it because it's human nature. So instead, if you like all of a sudden have this thought and it's not assuming the best, go, okay, how can I reverse that? I'm just going to assume the best intention right now because it's going to always end better. Always, always. And if something needs to be handled because maybe the intention wasn't the best, it will still be handled better if you say, hey, I'm assuming that you didn't mean that to happen the way it did, right? So you're giving them the benefit of the doubt. You're not you're going to give them the benefit of the doubt. And then if they're like, oh no, actually, that was my bad, and you're giving them then the opportunity if they need to own it. But yeah, just
Or
assume
if
the
they
best of
did do
people.
it, if they just want to be a jerk sometime and they did do it on purpose, and it's like, you know what you just did? You just gave them the benefit, like you just gave them the grace. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yes.
You gave them the grace
Yes.
to allow them to be kind of a butt for a minute, and then you gave them the opportunity to apologize for it. Because sometimes, yeah, people do things,
Yeah.
but hopefully, but it's not on me, right?
Yes.
It's not on me.
Yes. Exactly. It's like, oh, that man, so and so's having a bad moment.
Right? I'm just gonna go over here.
Right? Like, how much better is that than the, why would they do that to me? Why would they get angry like that and make me feel uncomfortable? And it's all about me, 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 me.
Right.
No, it's not about you. Let them own it. Let them own it. It's so empowering when you can do that. It's so empowering.
I was just gonna say empowering. I was just gonna say, how much more empowering is it to take the high road? And it's hard. It's hard to say that. And we sound like, oh, I always take the high road. I'm gonna tell you, I most definitely do not. I do my
Yes.
best. I do
Yes.
my best. But
Yes.
there is some vengeance in me, and there is some serious blueprinting that needs to be worked out. And so I don't always. But it means that I do a lot of apologizing. I do a lot of backtracking, and that's worse. I'm a stove toucher. I'm a stove toucher, and that's worse. So if you can figure out how to just be the person that takes the high road in the first place, I swear to you, you'll be better off. But yeah, some of us touch the stove, but it's knowing that you now have to make amends and fix it.
Well, and that I applaud you for that because there's a lot of people that don't even do that. And so if you do have a moment, right? And you do blow or you do get upset at something, be okay to say, "Oh my gosh, I'm really sorry, guys." you know, like be okay. It's okay to show humility and it's okay to be human and make a mistake.
Right.
It is okay. I don't know if you wanted to touch on setting some boundaries for just making it through this crazy time with everything that moms get on their plate and
Oh
the
my
yes
gosh.
and the no's.
Yes, if you have some wisdom to impart in this, I would love it because I'm a broken record here. I am a broken record. I loved actually that you said that's interesting because you know Jerry, right? You know Jerry Jorgensen.
Yes,
That is one
yes,
of my most favorite comments from her is saying, "Well, that's interesting.
yeah,
It's not good, it's not bad, it just is."
yes, yes. It's so good. Well, and that's when with that, you're able to acknowledge what they said. You
Yeah,
acknowledge
you
how they
acknowledged.
feel. That's validating somebody that is sharing something. Um, but as we get into this crazy time, moms, you are going to be so busy with different things on your plate. Um, and 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 like I said, like you don't have to have kids in your home to be crazy busy. Like I
No.
have so much going on right now in preparing for her son's wedding that's happening in between Thanksgiving and Christmas. I've
Mm.
got other big events that are happening at the same time. I've got a bridal shower that's going to be this Monday. I've got my entire family coming in for Thanksgiving. I've got, all these things, right? So, where's the boundaries of what you can do and can't do, right? To be able to stay sane.
Right.
Honestly.
And not to hit burnout every 10 minutes, right?
Yes.
It's starting
Yes.
to you have to recognize that there are some things maybe you want to do. And I know it's a little different when you're the mother of the bride versus the mother of the groom. I know for those kind of circumstances, or for Thanksgiving or for parties, whether you're the host or just showing up, right? There's different things. And I added a lot of tips in my Friday episode just now that I hope everyone listened to. If not, go back and listen to. But I would love your tips on how to create that balance and how you figure out the things that are a yes and a no.
Okay, awesome. So first of all, most likely you are going to have moments of out of balance. It's impossible to stay in balance, especially if you have a lot of things coming on at once. And what I find is ladies get so wrapped up in I'm not in balance, I'm not in balance, I can't do all this, that's creating more imbalance.
Right.
Okay? So number 1, you're going to have times of not being in balance. It's better our thought processes around that are going to create the feelings, the actions and the results.
The revitalized
If
loop.
yes, so if I was constantly going this sucks. I can't do this. I'm so frustrated. There's too many things. Oh my gosh. And always feel like in meltdown mode. Instead, if I was saying, I have a lot going on and a lot I've got to get done, and this is temporary. Come December 26th, things are going to be a lot slower and I'm going to make it. Okay. Our mindset is so incredible. So incredible and changes then the thoughts, the actions, and the result, right? The
Right.
revitalized loop. It changes it. So, with that being said, if you have like major mayhem going on, let's it's I love teaching by example because examples women can like put themselves in those shoes, right? So, let's say you have the entire family coming to your house, you are hosting Thanksgiving, okay? So you are in charge of hosting Thanksgiving um, at your home, and somebody calls you up and says, "Hey, are you able to help us with a project at the school the day before they get out for break?" It's okay to say no. It's okay to say no to something like that. Okay. Now I'm going to throw in a little curveball. Okay. You have a neighbor, um, a curveball. I think I said that wrong. Anyway,
No,
you
you're
have
good.
a neighbor who is having surgery and they called and said, "Hey, can you help take a meal in when she gets home?" You're really busy, right? You've got a lot going on. But this is where I see the boundaries take us away from the ability to serve. We boundary our ways out of serving, and there is a level of um, capacity that we gain when we serve in areas that we can. So this is going to be kind of, there's no black and white. It's a gray area. There's not a right or wrong, but you have this close neighbor right next door or
Right.
whatever that needs a meal brought in. And you say, you know what? I would love to help. I'm not able to do the full meal, but could I bring a salad and some rolls? And they're like, yeah, great. And you go to Costco and you pick up a bag of rolls and a couple salad mixes and you take them over at this designated time and somebody else was able to do the main course. Or you say, sure, but I'm going to bring in,
Shut the door.
pizza or I'm going to bring in some takeout,
Yes.
right? So the school thing, I'm saying, yeah, you could say no to that. Chances are there's 30 other moms in there that there's somebody that's not hosting Thanksgiving that they're going to find. but the neighbor right next door, I'm using that as an example because I see people boundarying themselves out of ways that they can serve and love the people around them. And and out of self-love for themselves in the name of self-care and self-love for themselves. And I'm not saying that at times that's going to be okay to do, but I am saying we need to be cautious because I feel like we're using boundaries as almost an excuse to only concentrate on what I have right here in front of me and I'm really, really busy.
Right.
Does that make sense? Because
Oh my gosh, yes.
there's nothing more valuable than those relationships that we are creating around us and to create a community. Um, that if we fall into that self-care mode, um, here's an example. Here's a perfect example. I didn't have time to do this podcast.
I know you did it, you poor woman. You poor woman. My anniversary is November 30th. I know
Oh,
exactly what you're talking about.
yes. I have my soon-to-be son's in-laws coming in today, and we are entertaining them from today till Tuesday. We have a bridal shower on Monday, bridal pictures on Tuesday. All of my kids, I have 5 children, only one is not coming, are coming in Sunday with my 5 grandkids. Um, so they'll be here for the bridal shower. Plus, I'm hosting Thanksgiving on Thursday. And I'm doing
Oh
the
my
bridal
God.
shower here, right? So I've got a lot of things. But Gina, I love you and I love what you do. And I'm like, I'm going to try and find some time because I felt like this was really important, right? And so it's those kinds of things. I could have set a stark boundary and went, no,
Yeah.
I can't do
And
this.
I would have understood.
I know you would have, but I also know like this is something that's important and I know a lot of good's going to come from it and I can take an
Mhm.
hour of my time. I'm going to figure it out, right? And so, but for me, it worked for me in this scenario. Some people it might not work, and that's okay. We are okay to have our no's. But I
Yeah.
just want women to be cautious of boundarying themselves out of so many no's that they aren't creating important relationships and connections around them in their community. Does that make sense?
And giving back, because I can't pull it up. I've used it so many times. I can't pull it up because Hayes has been sneaking in here every so often and stealing my phone. But there's a percentage of how much happiness we gain from
Yes.
giving back, from the service of others. So when you eliminate that because maybe you don't feel like it today, we know what that feels like. I do not feel like a lot of things. I am in England right now and I feel like I should be hibernating. I don't want to do a lot of things. I know how that feels. I am traveling. I'm on a 5-month trip with my family, but I have a community of women that I want to serve, right? That fills me up. This is service. It's proven that these acts of service provide happiness for us. That's filling my own cup. So, yes, I absolutely understand what you're saying with that. And that is the focus that I want to put on this podcast. If you get anything from this, it's you are allowed to say no. First of all, you are allowed. It's not your job to take on the world's everything and add it to your to-do list. It's not. There are already plenty of things on there that you should probably take off anyway. But in the sake of your humanity and your happiness and your beautiful gifts, God-given gifts, because some people are the flippin' care package, take a meal to somebody. God gave them the ability and the gifts to make the most beautiful packages, right? Or make someone feel just the most loved. They need to share those gifts. Okay,
Yeah.
so you need to figure out if those are your gifts and work those out more and eliminate the other crap that
Hmm.
doesn't serve you. That was
Hmm.
where I was going with that too, is when you're saying you're going to bring dinner to people. I think that women also bombard themselves with it's supposed to look this way. My house has to look this way. I can't have anyone come over because there's toys on the ground. Oh my gosh. I will tell you that clutter creates so much anxiety in me personally. I know what that feels like because of my blueprints. But I also can logically recognize that laundry can get put into a hidey hole closet and I will be able to come back to it. It's not going anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So let's prioritize. Let's look at things in the way that we are already prepared for what's going to happen, so that when those whoopsies get thrown in, like we all know they
Mm-hmm.
will, those
Mm-hmm.
curveballs will, no matter, like, who all says that they had the most planned, perfect pregnancy, delivery, everything? What?
Yes.
You are
Yeah.
a lying sack of crap, because
Yeah.
it does not happen. Okay? We know. But if you are prepared for any extras, if you are ahead of the game, if you've budgeted, if you've planned, if you've, expect the worst, hope for the best, expect the worst, then you're better off to, when those things happen, say, oh, you know what? I choose joy. I choose happiness. I choose my gifts of service over these things that can be done later, right?
Mhm.
We have to trust ourselves in those moments. And this
Yes.
absolutely goes with relationships. It's,
Mhm.
it's these relationships should mean more to you than other relationships. So, what are you really doing there? Ask yourself,
Mhm.
really intentionally ask, am I doing this because I really truly don't believe that this person wants the best for me? Or am I just doing this because I got my feelings hurt and I want to stay the victim because it's the
Mhm.
easier place for me to do it,
Mhm. Right?
right?
Yeah.
So,
And when we allow ourselves to recognize, if we are like, I'm kind of playing the victim, I think, right? That gives us the opportunity to grow because we
right,
can't change what we don't recognize. So ladies, if you find yourself, you're like, oh my gosh, I kind of think of playing the victim in this relationship and I want to change it. Look how much better off you're going to be, right? Like, don't be afraid of trying to find your weaknesses, the things that you need to work on in that in realm in that kind of, especially in that realm, because it's only going to help you become a better person.
right,
And I'm going to go back to what you said on being able to let things go a little bit. I wish so bad I was back then the way I am now. I wish I could have
right.
talked to my younger self. And so, ladies, if you are younger, because I have 5 kids, my baby's getting married, I have 5 grandchildren, and um, and I already know, as soon as they all get here Sunday night, that door's going to open, and I'm going to have toys all over my house,
Yep.
and I'm totally okay with it now. I am so okay with it. Whereas when I was a young mom, I wasn't, and I was constantly so much pressure to have everything picked up, and people can come over to my house. In fact, I had a friend drop by a couple days ago, and I promise I do my dishes maybe once a day now. I just leave them in the sink, and I just don't do it because I'm doing other things, and I'm not stressed about it. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm just saying that's where I'm at right now. And I had a friend come over, and we were chatting for a second. She goes, "I haven't seen your house. Let me see your house." I'm like, "Okay, well, it's not put together." And I was totally okay to walk her through my house. There were beds that weren't made because I'd had company, and I was stripping beds. And I just walked her through my house. My kitchen was a mess and stuff. And Trina, 20 years ago, couldn't have done that. Couldn't
Mortified.
have done that. I would have been
Yeah. You've
mortified.
been mortified.
Yeah, totally mortified. And so the peace I have now is so much better than what I had then. And so, ladies, I don't know how to tell you right now in the amount of time we have left how to get there. But I am going to just say it is okay to be human.
Yeah.
Ladies, it's okay to be human, and stuff is not more important than relationships. Accomplishments are not more important than relationships. They really aren't. Like, we really need to, I feel like we society is pulling so away. I mean, we already, everything's done through texting, social media. We already don't have the face to face interactions like we used to. Um, Getting to know your neighbors and having, um,
A village.
yeah, it is important. It is important. And it's going to fill your cup more than you think. Just like our neighbor across the street daughter just got married, and we went to the reception, and the mom came up to my husband and said, "Did you take our garbages in the other night?" You know, and we're like, "This is your reception. You don't need to be talking about this." And she's like, "But he and Jeff just simply was like, they are trying to plan a wedding, and I'm just going to put their garbages in for him. Not a big deal." But it
Yeah.
meant so much to her. The tiny,
Right.
small act of service meant so much to her. And the fact that she would bring it up at her daughter's reception,
Right.
like,
She
right?
noticed.
Yes, those little things, like, don't throw those to the wayside. I don't know. I just feel like a lot of us are bounding us out of, I don't have time for any of that. All I have is what I need to get accomplished. And we're missing out on stuff that really, that service, that energy, there's nothing to replace. I know there's those statistics on when we serve and give for others. There is huge power in that for
Right.
ourselves. We come away filled even more than they do, if that makes sense. Like the
It does,
benefits.
because why? Look at motherhood. Look at
Yes,
motherhood. It is the
perfect
most,
example.
like, give, 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 but then we want to do it more. We want to do it
Yes,
more. We want to continue to do it, right?
yes,
It's a
yes,
perfect example because it fulfills us. That
it
is our
does.
value, that it fulfills us to be of service and valuable. Yeah. I hear you. I hear you. I
So
love you.
good.
I know that this was so hard for you, and I truly appreciate it so much because I know that your words will land exactly where they need to. And I felt like as soon as you brought this topic up, I was like, this is a very important message, and I would really, really like to get it out. So thank you so much for making that happen for me. And
You
it
are
was so good to
so
see you.
welcome.
It
Yes, so
was
good to
so
see
good
you.
to
And
see somebody.
I know for sure. And when you get home, let's go to dinner or something in
Yeah,
January when things have slowed down and
absolutely.
get caught up. But yes, to
Thank
all
you
of your
so much.
listeners, they are so lucky to
Where
have
where
you.
can they find you? Because ladies, you want to be in touch with Trina. Her courses are amazing. They're so wonderful. I've taken two and I love them, and I will continue to support her and share her name with anyone who needs it. So where can they come find you?
So trinaglines.com. So you spell my last name Glines. So trinaglines.com, and then also on Instagram at Trina Glines. And they can DM me on Instagram if they have any questions, want to find anything out. I'll answer my DMs pretty quickly. And yeah, my courses on my website. You can just go and learn a little bit about it. And yeah, it's pretty powerful stuff. I have yet to meet a woman that has taken my course that didn't absolutely love it. So,
Yep, I'm one of
it's,
them.
yeah, it's fun. It's fun stuff. So I love what I do. I actually have right now, one, maybe two openings for one-on-one coaching too as well. And so I do that. I take on very few clients because I get very invested in what we do.
Yes.
And if somebody does one-on-one coaching with me, I give them my course at no cost. So, but I do have like one, maybe two. I don't have my calendar right here that I could put a second one in, but for sure I have one spot left or open right now. But I love it. I just love helping ladies find their best selves and create the create a very how do I want to word this? Realistic, very realistic life that brings them incredible joy and happiness.
That's a perfect word. And that is not a buzzword. I
No,
love it. Because
I love
usually you
that.
hear your dream life. I've actually wrote your dream life on a couple things, and I thought, man, that's a salesman-y thing. I'm like a snake oil salesman because dream life, really? Do you even know what that looks like? I don't, because
Yeah,
my dream life changes every 2 years. I can
right?
tell you what my dream life, it's not going to look the same in 2 years from now. I guarantee you.
That's so
I
true.
just
That is
told
so
you, we just
true.
talked about that. I'm like, what my
Yes,
dream life was last year is no longer my dream life, and we're changing it. So, thank you. That was
right?
a perfect word for that.
Yes, great, great. Well, you are awesome.
All
Thank you
right,
so
lady.
much,
I
Gina.
appreciate you. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay, we'll see ya.